Hello, I'm Kerry Kuhn. We're here today at the CSI Saddle Pad Factory. We've got Rhonda Martin, an equine physical therapist, here with us today. We've got our little Road to the Horse wildcard colt 7 with us to discuss, Rhonda, some issues that I'm having, saddle fit. I'm extremely interested in knowing, is there something I can do underneath my saddle that can help this horse perform at a higher level? Now, the idea of me just throwing a saddle on him, we can clearly see by the white marks I've already left on his back from what my saddles have been doing, okay? And it's to the point where if I truly have my horse in mind, I can't ignore this anymore.
No.
So as we go through this horse and you point out some stuff that you see, you know, his anatomy here, lower in the front than the back. I mean, there's a lot of things coming to play with this horse being 3 years old that I'm interested in knowing what I can do better for him to make him a better athlete.
Well, I've got some answers for you already. So I work with people like Kerry every day to help them understand their horse's body from a biomechanical standpoint based on their age, their use, their breed. And I look at how the horse is currently standing, what I have in front of me, because that's what Kerry's got to work with. So ideally, we start with 100% of a horse. And realistically, most of us don't have 100% of a horse to ride every day. That's the ideal. So I do a lot of performance consulting where I look at horses and decide where I've got what I consider performance leaks. Where am I losing performance in this horse? And how do we get that back? Because let's say you're going to compete on this horse. Let's say because of a little bit of a downhill balance, his top line, we're going to talk about his posture being a little bit negative instead of positive. We've got some saddle fit issues. We're going to look at how that takes away from your 100%. Let's say if we added all those little percentages up, we're at, 75 or 80% of that horse's total performance. Mm-hmm. Well, you go and you walk in the show ring or the competition arena, and nerves, different situation, you can lose easily another 20%. So if you take 20 and 20, you're at 40, you're down to 60% of a horse. That's not very good odds. So that's how I try and explain to people I work with every day. It's just not about me coming out to do a nice little massage on the horse. I'm looking at what the horse's conformation and his muscular development is telling me. And this is a 3-year-old horse. That's your wild card for the Road to the Horse. And as I look at him, I can already see things that other people don't see because I look at it every day. And it's my job to help my customer see what I see so that you can head off these problems before they manifest themselves into white hair or, other issues. By the way he's standing, when I look at 7, his top line has a swoop to it. So he's going to move hollow. His back is down. His pelvis is pointed up. That's going to leave his hind legs out behind his body. He has a bit of a curve to his neck right here, and it's getting just a little more developed on the bottom side. That's pretty typical of a 3-year-old stock type who's downhill, and they're kind of carrying their weight downhill. And even though he looks well fleshed out and muscly, he's still not quite strong enough to carry himself rocked back on his haunches. He's learning that. And since his balance is downhill, it makes it that much bigger of a challenge for you to pick up that front end and get the back up and keep him rocked back. So one of the things I show all my customers is, as I look at this top line and we palpate the top line, we know he's had some saddle issues there that Kerry's already addressed with a CSI pad and with a new tree that's a lot wider. And very nicely, this horse is already healed up a lot where he's not flinching, but he started to hold his back in a negative posture. And when they do that, they'll leave their butt sticking up in the front and their withers will look lower. We're going to grab a stick to show you that balance. So if we take a stick and we look at the level of this horse, this stick is about level right here. You can see the deficit here, how much lower he looks here, and the hollow place we have here. So ideally, when a horse is moving in a balanced state, this whole top line comes up and comes up under the saddle, and the pelvis is rounded. Kerry, I'm going to have you just kind of hold this for me. A lot of people have seen the butt tuck exercises and the belly lifts. I'm going to use a hoof pick to help me a little bit. There's a spot that's a reaction point of the nervous system here on the hip, and I want that horse to round his back up. And what Seven, he's a real kind horse, he's having a very hard time rounding his pelvis. That's what's going to put his hind end up underneath him and lift his core right here, so you can see this dip. So Kerry is fighting literally a downhill battle, trying to get this horse up and moving well at the canter, and so thereby developing himself that way from the get-go. So if you're already having this much problem on the ground, getting a horse who's resisting, raising his lower back, it's going to be super hard to get in the saddle. There we go. That's a better lift this time, and notice that was hard for him. He's a little stiff in the low back, and he lifted to about here, so he left the front end down. So it's my guess, and you can confirm this, that when you're riding him, he's going to feel, especially at the canter, like he's heavy on the forehand, and it's very hard to get his shoulders up and that neck up and nice instead of feeling a little hollow and wanting to travel heavy. Does he feel like that to you?
He does, and this horse has gotten very willing, and he'll give me what he can, but I know that when he does give me a little bit, as soon as I let go of it, he falls right back to where
he falls into
been.
this hole.
Yeah.
That's an excellent way to put it. So I'm going to lift him from just behind the cinch with a hoof pick, and I am scratching pretty hard. This is also where this horse needs to lift, and it's a belly lift, but he's not easy. And so now notice that the withers are getting closer to being even. He needs some kind of daily PT to reformat the muscles, and I will have people run their hoof pick along these abs, and I'm being very careful with this horse. A lot of horses would kick at me for doing this, but he's learned to use these muscles wrong and let these go. He's not using his core abdominal muscles, and so I draw lines through them before I get on to remind the body that they're there. I'm telling the brain to connect the dots and learn to take this motion instead of the hollowed out motion. He's just gotten the wrong response, partly because of his growth pattern. He's been an uphill, his hind end keeps getting taller ahead of his withers. So he never quite gets that chance to level out.
So with that in conjunction with what I was doing with my saddles the first 2 months, I wasn't doing anything to help this horse.
No, the white spots he got here was from the shoulder blade as he took a step forward and had too much pressure of that saddle bar right here. His shoulder blade moved from this white spot here all the way to that white spot there and rolled that tissue in between. So he got a little pinch and roll here and a little pinch and roll here. So he just showed me another thing when I picked up his leg. His shoulder is stiff. So that's another exercise we'll look at showing you to help free this up, is when horses have been downhill, they've been hollowing themselves out, and these muscles pattern themselves hollow, short, and tight instead of up, full, and long. So I show people to stretch their horse. They're going to pick up that foot and they're going to relax this horse's shoulder and just wiggle it loose and let that horse let his shoulder just slide down his body and hang, because the shoulder is put on all with soft tissue and it can get adhesed and kind of stuck. Okay. So from here, I'm going to cup the fetlock and the foreleg, and I'm going to step up underneath it, Kerry, and I'm going to push the entire shoulder as a unit up, and you see that made him sore. He went, that hurt. I want to see that shoulder blade come up just like you would do a shoulder shrug to relieve shoulder tension. So I'm going to lift it very carefully. So I want to see this place rise up. And we're undoing some of that hollowing he's done to get away from the saddle pressure. So this hollowed posture we've gotten can come A, from growth pattern, and B, he was already downhill, and the saddle sitting heavy on his shoulder made him go, ugh, to get away from it, and he learned to carry himself hollow and tight. So that became your muscle memory.
Okay.
So my job is to help you see it, give you a couple exercises that you do for a couple of weeks, and then maybe here and there to keep him loose.
So once a guy gets them loose, then they don't have to work as hard with these exercises to keep them loose.
No, because then you're going to start to transfer it over to the saddle. Your horse should be able to maintain that top line. You're going to be able to put your leg on him, you know, just roll your spur on him a little bit. Right here, just like a belly lift. It's a belly lift from the saddle. You're going to touch him with your spur right here and say, doop, doop. Get sensitive and lift your rib cage. And so my exercises on the ground totally transfer over to your saddle work. He's already holding a better top line right now, and we've barely started to break him loose. There's so much more potential in here, and that's what I love showing people is, I see this negative top line, and I see this horse that's young and trying to grow, and his body's putting all his energy into growing and plus getting fit, you know, from the riding, and I see the wrong muscle groups being used. So I'm here to reverse that, show you, help you learn to see it, and then give you a real simple program to undo that here. Because if your horse can't do it here on the ground without a saddle and a rider, he can't do it well. He can only hold it, like you said, for a couple of seconds, and then it all falls apart. Because it hurts. It hurts. That hurt for him to pick this up. So I'm going to stretch him out a little bit more. And I'm going to lift. Ooh, that's hard for him. There we go. Good boy. Now I got to build his confidence about this. If you step around to my right, Kerry, I picked this leg up and he's real uncomfortable about it. And the reason is when I have this leg parallel to the ground, just with the knee bent, I'm tensioning him from the elbow tricep all the way up, feel the groove, all the way up the cinch line, all the way up to here where you got the white spot. And he's wanting to spontaneously stretch right there. Oop. He's trying to figure it out. And so I have this leg up. I'm going to wiggle it loose. He's not fighting me. He's just kind of looking for it. And I'm going to wiggle it loose. We'll get him out of trouble there. And there. It's okay. And then I'm just going to set him back down because he hasn't really had his leg picked up in that extreme of a way. And ideally, I'm going to be able to pick that up. We're going to stretch the shoulder forward. You're going to be able to see the entire stretch through here. And then I'm going to add a couple of PT circles to turn the neuromuscular apparatus in the muscle off so that it has a chance to relax and take on a new shape. It's very simple. I keep things in threes.
Now, Rhonda, all this stuff you're saying goes against my upbringing of, well, he's just unwilling. Or he's hard-headed, or he's tough-minded. I mean, there's so many things that I look at where this horse has challenged me to look at things a little bit different. And he's brought me to a point now where I'm much more open to this because I can feel underneath me I don't have what I want. And the things that I'm doing, he's trying to give me, but he's not able to give me in the manner that I need. So I can see the value in this. This horse has shown me that. I'm just at a spot now where I need to soak up as much knowledge as I can so I can help people understand and not be like I used to be.
Well, I think that's really an awesome perspective because people always ask me, Rhonda, where'd you learn this? Why do you think like this? And honestly, you know, I wanted to be a vet. I didn't get to go to vet school. I have a degree in anatomy and physiology, and it was endurance riding. I met people who thought differently, and I just kind of went, wow. Their saddles were totally different. There were people working on horses. They did lameness exams, which I had never seen. This is 1991. And I saw things in a totally different light. And I wanted to have a sound horse over 25, 50, or 100 miles. And I'd already done some other disciplines. I'm like, well, what does it take to make a horse comfortable? Because I saw within that ride that if your horse was getting sore anywhere during an endurance ride or your equipment didn't fit right, I began to see the immediate relationship between girth sores and problems, they're compensating for the saddle. So they wouldn't be sound for the duration of the ride, because let's say you ride 50 miles in 3.5 hours ride time. You find out really fast what doesn't work because it's so concentrated. If you ride a half hour, 45 minutes, a few times a week, and things don't fit so good, they don't add up as fast. It's not the last straw that broke the camel's back. It was all the straws that came before. And that's what horses are. We add all these straws onto their body, and we get to this last straw where now they're acting bad and they're acting like they're not willing, and we can't get them framed up, and we're wondering why. Well, all these other straws didn't add up, and it manifests itself as the wrong muscle memory. If we're not training for the correct muscle memory, we're training for the wrong muscle memory. So I just try and put a little common sense, get rid of some of the old ideas, and go, what is my horse telling me? Sometimes they're screaming at us, but we have our training concepts in mind, and we think of horses in a certain light, and we're like, we're going to get that horse in soft and supple, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get him there. I get that, because I've been there. And I had some horses change my mind. I'll tell you, a big factor is I'm a woman and I'm older. I'm not as strong. I don't have as much reaction time as I used to. And I have some nice horses and work with a lot of horses. I'm having to think smarter instead of more physical. So that also changed my mindset and brought me to this. And it is amazing. Your horse's top line and his neck, just from a couple of stretches, is already changing. His top line here, he's still a little hollow, but I bet he lifts easier this time. Yeah, we're waking up the body to be what it can be. I see potential where other people don't know how to see it. So I feel it's my job when I come out and work with somebody to go, this is what I feel and see. Now I'm going to teach you how to feel and see it so that you can be a better horseman. Because it's all right there. I think us saying that horses should, if we train them right, they can get there. That's in there. It doesn't always work that way. And sometimes it takes one to show us that.
That's been a huge part of my program, and this horse coming along has just helped me see that I can help get one's mind willing, but if the muscles aren't able to cooperate, I mean, that to me is where I feel like I've been. The mind has been trying, but everything back here wasn't able to.
If I came today and I analyzed this horse, and I start letting them get to know me before I ever start doing any of this so that they know I'm going to work with them, I see a horse who's sensitive. I like his face shape. I like where his swirls are. He's got a sensitive muzzle. He doesn't look like a horse that's overly reactive, but he's smart. He looks like a horse that would try to me. Just looking at his expression. So then I look at what the body is telling me. I'm like, biomechanically, this horse is going to have a really hard time lifting his back, rocking back, getting his front end up, and moving well. So if we're moving in a hollowed frame, that's all we're training for. Even if you get those couple of seconds, and it falls apart right away, you know something isn't working. And then you have to evaluate. Does the horse just not have enough talent? Is it just not strong enough? Do I have a foot balance problem? What's going on? But that's where I like to make the difference for people. We'll step around the back of him and look at him again. He's already holding himself a little more level. Now I'm going to lift him again, and now I'm only using about 5 or 6 pounds of pressure.
Back on there while you do that.
Yeah.
So we can
see
how
now,
much closer.
This horse doesn't look downhill in the front end at all. And what I'm doing is I'm engaging his core, and this is nothing new. Hillary Clayton does this beautifully, but she did it with dressage horses. And then now his pelvis is starting to think rocked down in back. That means coil the stifle, coil the hips. So now I'm going to ask him, good boy, and he's a little more comfortable. He's stepping away because these muscles have been overly tight. So I'm going to ask him again, and he's now lifting all the way up to the front. now that he's getting that feel, we think of it as being natural for horses, but it's not always natural. And sometimes we ride it off of them. I know I've ridden plenty of maneuvers off of horses that were natural and then had to train it back in. So we're going to ask him again. And I have people take this. Here, I'll grab this. I'll have them do this several times a day for the first few weeks and do some of the leg stretches, and then you back off. You can see, just like in your riding, he falls right back to this. It's because his core is not strong, and that is the muscle memory. And I'll tell you, he's very kind, because a lot of horses will kick at me when I do that because they hurt here, and he's never even thought about it. He just went, okay, it doesn't feel good, but I'll try. That tells me a lot of other things about this horse, that when he gets loosened up and you keep helping him get there, he will figure it, he will get there. He has the capability to do it.
Well, I had some very prominent people in the equine industry tell me before I left her to the horse how tough-minded and how much I was going to hate this horse for the first 8 months. But what little I've rode him, I didn't feel that here, but everything back here. And it's caused me to scratch my head and say, what am I missing?
So I look at him and I told you, I think this looks like a nice and sensitive and smart horse. He has tried to work with every single thing I gave him. The only reason he moved away is because it hurts. And this, when they move away, when I raise up this back, it's because it hurts to lift the low back and the lumbar. Those muscles have been so shortened and tightened down like this. You can see him pull his pelvis up, right, that it hurts to release it and get to the positive place. So that's why it's a little PT every day until those ligaments loosen up and until those vertebrae can spread open. And then there's one other super exercise I like to show people. And when a horse, we'll face him back this way, when they're so tight in the low back, they have the same core muscles we have. Their core muscles attach on the bottom of the vertebra, pass through the pelvis, back to the back side of the hip right here. And when those psoas muscles over tighten, you will consistently have a tight low back. I could massage him and massage him. You could have the chiropractor out, and I bet this comes right back. So here's my test. I love it. It's very simple. We're gonna pick up this hind leg and circle it. Circles turn the Golgi bodies off, and they can continue to fire when the muscle is in a state of stress. And until that psoas muscle releases, you will have a tight low back. You can't touch it. You can't get to it. It's deep inside the body. But we'll pick up a hind leg, and we're going to flex it. Come on. We're going to flex it, and I'm going to make him feel secure, and I'm going to make small circles and gradually widen them out, and I do it towards the midline, and from the midline back towards the edge of the body until that leg feels free. I'll flex it again and set it back down. I'll do each side. I'm going to do it a couple of times, and we're going to check his low back. He already moves easier on the right hind leg, and that could be because his right hip hurts and it's easier to stand on his left hip. It's not always the leg you pick up that has the problem. This has been a stiffer hip. This whole leg is stiffer, and we want to break that loose. Oh, good boy. And see, this is a horse that wants to try. He's just following my every motion. As far as I know, he's never had any of this done. The horses start to like this. It feels good, and they get really relaxed. And if they get a little worried, I just pet that leg down to where I want it, shake it loose. I don't fight them. I add some circles. Super. Okay, already he started to lift up a little bit. If you just want to stay at his head, Kerry, and kind of keep him from moving forward, I'm going to ask him to lift up again. Oh, much easier, much more complete. I would say that this horse probably has had real tight core psoas muscles. And so I have my owners do that twice a day for 2 weeks.
What you just did.
What I just did, that's it. And if they're tight here, I never do the stifle stretch out to the back. That'll overstretch the psoas muscle. We leave that alone for a while till this settles down already. See how it's got less tension? And the low back right here, his whole top line. Yeah, there's your horse. We still have a little issue right here, but that will get to go away.
Okay.
That would take some actual massage from me, because now I've whittled it down to where I know he has problems and he has a big spasm in his glute right here. So that's probably when I went to pick this leg up and he had to flex this glute muscle. He's like, ow, ow, because it shortens it even more. But if you want to feel a Kerry, I'll show you where it is. He's got a wad in there about that big, and that won't go away. If you just curl your fingers, yeah, right. Feel that there. Big old lump in there?
Right there.
That attaches right to here. And so the shorter that is, the less range of motion he has in his pelvis. So I try and keep it very simple, but you can already see that your horse's top line with just a few simple scratchings away at his surface is already starting to open up. And I want to see this ligament here stretch out from here and get longer instead of come back. That ligament goes from the ears, branches to here, branches again to here, and then goes through the tail. It has 3 branches, so they're totally connected from the very top of their skull all the way to the tip of their tail. It's been brought to my attention that the sire of this horse, Royal Flush, Royal Fletch? Royal Fletch, sounds like a cutter. That they're notorious for being tough-minded. Well, I see a lot of cutter types that are built like this. You know, they ride them that way in the show ring and on cattle. They're dropped down low in front. But when you try and get something else put on them, you know, this horse has a natural tendency to be a little long in the body and a little lower in the front end. But not all horses naturally have body carriage. Some do, some don't. That's why we tend to value these short backs, because those horses tend to carry themselves up better than a long-backed horse. But I've had wonderful success with longer-backed horses being super athletic. But it takes a little more to keep them fit and sound and show them which muscles to use. So it's proprioception. If you see your horse learning to use the wrong muscle groups and you start to get a negative top line, then you ask yourself, what do I need to do to show that horse which muscle group to use? That's not always an easy question to answer, and that's why I work with so many people. So he's using these muscles too short and hard and not using these at all, and consequently other muscles got too tight. And once they get in that pattern, what I explain to people is repetitive motion creates tissue shortening. So just by the very nature of riding, we shorten the tissue of horses, but we want them to be long and elastic and relaxed. So we've got to build that into our program. But right here, where I've got that big spasm, more often than not, horses with hind end problems, before they ever get a hock or a stifle issue, they have a big spasm in their hip. And physically what a spasm is you have muscle fibers doing this to lengthen and contract. And they should slide over one another. And when an area gets overworked and lacks oxygen, those fibers start to get close together and adhere. They're trying to protect themselves from getting overworked and hurt. So then finally, they start to curl over and you start adding more and more fibers. And so right here, we've got this knot and you can physically feel a wad of tissue. Once it gets to that point and it's considered a spasm, technically, it will never release itself. You could turn this horse out for 5 years. And once you start working them, it will reactivate. It's still there. Those fibers have curled and gotten adhesions. They can no longer slide, and they tend to add others to them to splint and protect the muscle in that area. So my job is to come in, break all of that loose, lengthen it, and then put the horse back into motion and regain that length of tissue. So that's what a really good therapist does. They recognize what the horse is capable of, where their body posture is, and try and sort out what is staying in the way of that horse reaching its potential.
So when you've got a spasm like he's got right here, how long does it typically take to get rid of it where you can move on?
For me, one treatment. And if I show people how to use a simple tool and do cross fiber friction with a tool and just go across that, you can probably get rid of it yourself. I'm very big on showing my owners what they can do. I usually give them 3 things, no more than 3, that will bring this horse into a healthier, more usable top line, so that we're training a positive top line instead of the negative top line. He is already holding himself more up. I'm going to lift him again. I'm going to use as light a pressure as possible, add a little. There we go. And he's very willing. He gets really soft to my touch. He's almost a little, oh, that feels kind of good. But it's going to take a little bit. And some people may even need a chiropractor. But for the people who don't have one locally around, I show them how to do a number of other stretches and that to help alleviate that tension. But he's already softer across his top line and standing a little more compressed. Standing with his legs a little more underneath himself instead of looking long. That's one of my first signs. Either horses don't feel good and they camp under like a circus horse on a drum, or they hollow and lengthen and get their legs out in front of them and then stand on their heels, which I don't want, and then let their hind legs stand out behind them, which overextends the stifle and the hock.
Okay.
So for me, it's all training. It's all training.
So if you don't have an understanding of the biomechanics of how a horse is put together and you're just riding them, we might spend all the time in the world and have the best techniques and ideas in mind, but really what are we creating?
A problem. And so I've just asked all my people that I work with, I'm like, I'm going to show you what I see, what your horse is telling me it is. And where a lot of this brings me to is people brought me there in the first place because they thought they just had a saddle fit problem and they wanted a pad to fix it. I'm like, well, you've got a lot of other things going on than just your saddle fit. So over and over, I try and tell people it's a big picture. And I don't want to make it complicated. I try and show them the basics, just a few things to look for, and to recognize that if you're starting with a horse that has a negative posture, and I fit a saddle and have a saddle custom made to that shape, I'm only perpetuating the negative posture. So I try and find where the horse naturally would be at rehabbed, and then I look at what I do in the interim, and that's where I build shims and stuff to level up front end low horses, especially when they're growing, and keep their balance and keep that bar from hitting on the edge of the shoulder, which makes them hollow out, and avoid those problems. So a lot of times it's just this combination of a few exercises on the ground, adjusting how we may fit that saddle in that pad, or changing a few things up, and then a few simple exercises and going from there.
Well, I can't thank you enough for the information today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kerry.
And just the ideas of showing me where this horse is so tight gives me a whole new perspective of when I am riding him. Am I just beating my head on the wall and his along with it while I'm out there, or am I truly doing him so good? So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.